Hey everyone, and welcome to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 4, Episode 2. It's called Family. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So, this is definitely a more downbeat episode, and it may be the biggest shift to pure serialized storytelling that I've ever seen from a Star Trek show. I mean, not including shit shows that came later, obviously, but
No, I get where you're coming from, because even though we've had like a lot of callbacks to big things in follow-up episodes, generally bigger episodes, this felt like a completely different ballgame. Like where, oh no, we're everything's on the table now. It's all just, we're not even going to try and pretend if this is your first episode that we're going to explain it all. It's just no, we're just deep into it.
yeah, it's just in multiple ways. The whole thing's about the aftermath of what happened last episode. It's about Picard dealing with the trauma of what he went through and him getting some things off his chest that he needs to get off his chest so he can move forward. Even the Worf subplot heavily referenced like his big episode from last season and kind of the status quo with him and how he is as a Klingon, and it's all kind of feeds into like, meeting his parents and all that for the first time. Well, for us, not for him, obviously, but so you've got all this stuff playing, and it kind of felt like it wasn't even, because it's one thing when they have like one or two little references, right, and it's obviously very different as well when it's just a straight up two-parter and it's just referencing the last part.
Sure,
but this was very much a case of everything in this episode is completely informed by what happened previously, and that's weird for Star Trek at this point. I mean, it's probably getting less weird now. This is probably just where we're going with this now, but that was something.
I would say
you go back to season 1, you're not finding this type of episode at all.
Oh, not a chance. And I would say informed it's almost too soft. I would say dependent on the previous context. In a way that, like I say, in this era of TV, generally speaking, the rule was you made your episode accessible to anyone who just happened to turn on the channel. They could pick it up and be like, okay, I'm fine from here. This one, I don't think works unless you have the context. I mean, with the context, I think it's really, really good.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't even necessarily, I mean, obviously there's a discussion to be had about TV of the time period. I'm just talking about comparing it solely with what Trek has only been up until this point, and what Trek is and what its type of episodes were. And I mean, even season 1 of Next Generation had more little callbacks to previous episodes than the original series ever had. Original series almost did none of that. And it's been something that's been growing a little bit over the course. I mean, we mentioned it quite a few times last season where there's just these little things where clearly the events that happen to the characters are still there and still kind of, at least informing the writing of the character and the performance of the character. Whereas this episode, the entire premise of the episode is that we have to, I mean, in a bare plot sense, there's the ship has to be, refurbished and fixed up and whatnot.
Repaired was the word.
Yeah, maintenance, whatever. But all the character stuff, especially Picard, all comes from dealing with what he went through. And I think it's interesting that it's not a big like payoff to something that's happened that's been set up. It's actually the more introspective element. It's the quieter story after a big event that we're getting here, which is something that I think adds a lot of weight to the episodes we just had. It adds a lot of weight to the two-parter that we just had, because all of a sudden it's not just something that's forgotten about next episode, it's something that is still weighing on the characters. In fact, there's a line in this episode where Picard's brother says that this is something that will always be with you and you're just going to have to learn to live with it. And I think that's probably going to be true, and it's something that might come up from time to time when Picard's maybe struggling with certain decisions, or maybe when at least the very least when they encounter the Borg again at some point, his personal experience is going to reform and recontextualize how he tackles the Borg, perhaps because he's went through that, because he understands what it's like to be assimilated, and maybe even a fear of it happening again, a fear of losing control. And this episode, I really enjoyed that this was just a downbeat episode, and I was enjoying everything what it was, and then it got elevated heavily when Picard started crying in the mud about how he lost control and how he didn't win and how he failed. And that performance, that moment, it was like I say, the episode was good before that. It didn't need to be anything more than what it was at that point. It was kind of like, okay, I'm enjoying everything with Worf and his parents is kind of fun and kind of funny how they're very human. He's obviously very not, and him kind of. But at the same time, he doesn't realize as he's complaining to O'Brien that what he's complaining about is the same thing that all humans complain about when their parents come to visit or whatever. And then, you know, the Wesley stuff's whatever. I mean, that's not really feeding off anything other than his dad's always been dead, and it's always been a thing for his character. And the Picard
we don't really care about the Wesley stuff. Just brush over that.
and the Picard stuff with the family, there's a lot of fun to be had there. You know, the first interactions with the kids that Picard amusingly calls uncle. You know, they flip the roles. I actually laughed out loud when the kid says, "Oh yeah, he said you were an arrow." What's the? And Picard's like, "Arrogant." Yeah, I said arrogant son of a. We'll talk about that later. Like that genuinely got a little chuckle out of me. And then all the scenes like showing you how different him and his brother are. You know, we're at the chateau and like his brother's like, you've been drinking that synthesized stuff. You've lost your palate for the real, because he gets the year off by one, which I have to assume is still quite impressive that he was even able to get that close. But
I guess if you grew up on a vineyard and were, you know, I assume were tasting this stuff from quite a young age, not necessarily in heavy amounts, but you know, learning the family trade, so to speak. It was always there. You'd be drinking it, especially the French. You know, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, they have no problem with serving children, you know, wine with a meal.
Yeah,
it's pretty common in a lot of Europe. So I imagine at that point, you probably do develop quite the palate.
Yeah, I have no understanding of wine palates whatsoever. I've never even tasted wine, but. So the thought that you can drink some wine and sort of actually place what year it is
only because he's had the year before and is just recalling, is it this one or that one, essentially.
Sure, but how different are the different years?
Could be drastically depending on the harvest, the weather of the year, you know, what the grapes were like. There's a lot of factors that really influence.
Yeah, but surely some years end up tasting the same as other years because the factors more or less line up.
No. The factors are never 100%. There's too many factors to play into everything. That there are subtle differences that I wouldn't be able to pick out in wine because that's not where my palate lays. But I believe they're there.
I don't think you have a palate when you get blind drunk.
I have a palate. Thank you very much.
Anyway, you've taken that. I don't care about any of this. The point of the scene is that his brother is very much someone who likes doing things the old-fashioned way. He doesn't like technology. He doesn't really like. One of the things they're talking about is this. I kept in my head called the Atlantis program. It was actually something slightly off. It was essentially.
No, it was the Atlantis something.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the word Atlantis. It was a land. At the end of the word was different. It was derived from the word Atlantis, but it wasn't the word Atlantis.
Are you sure?
I am positive. I noted it because it was different. That's why I'm sure. It was like Atlantis or something. I don't know. There was it had a slightly different sound at the end. But the point is that they're developing like another continent essentially underwater, and like Picard's been hearing about it. He thinks it's quite interesting. And his brother's very like, no, we're just making things more convenient. Things are too convenient. It's kind of a real ideology battle at the table. And it's kind of funny given how often Picard is in disputes where he's arguing on his principles, on his ideologies. It's kind of funny to think that him and his brother just have a simple difference of how they view the world and society. And how his brother is very much always, your hands in the mud, you got to be working hard, you got to do all these things. And, it's not about leaving home and going off on adventures. To the point where his brother, Robert, is like actually, kind of pissed about the fact that his son seems to be having aspirations of becoming a Starfleet captain someday. But, I mean, that's just always the cool uncle syndrome, I suppose. As they always seem cooler than your parents. Probably because you have to put up with them as often.
Probably. And they can get away with more stuff, right? Because they don't feel they have to be strict. So
all that stuff is it's solid enough, and but I think the big drama from Picard's plot comes from two key things. One is the scene that I briefly mentioned earlier. The other is that he actually is tempted by an offer. He's tempted by the offer to leave Starfleet and basically head up this initiative to develop this continent and see it through. And he's talking about this to this guy who's like friends with his brother, who's running the whole thing, or he's not running the whole thing, but he's he got a promotion. He's like a supervisor.
He's like a manager, yeah.
Because one of the things was that the sister-in-law was his wife never shuts up about his promotion. He's a supervisor now.
I appreciate that. I think his name was Lewis. Was aware of it as well. She's like, because I hear you like running the place now. He's like, only if you listen to my wife.
Yeah, and. And Picard says, okay, I would never consider leaving Starfleet, but I've got some ideas. I'm interested in what you're doing. So, well, we'll talk about it. And there's a moment where Picard's talking to his sister-in-law and says, what kind of scares me is that for a brief moment, I've thought about it. Like, I've thought about what if I just give up being a Starfleet captain and go and do this instead? Because it is genuinely quite interesting. And it's kind of like, it's a really interesting thing to put in the episode after his encounter with the Borg, after him being assimilated and recovering from it. This idea that he is, even for a brief moment, tempted by another life, that maybe this life isn't for him anymore.
Yeah, it's really gotten to him.
So that's really fascinating. And then, of course, the actual fight with his brother kind of essentially intentionally edging him on to get it out of his system.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. And it's not to say that the hostility there isn't founded in like truth. There is a lot of actual like bickering and jealousy and all these things between them, but he's doing what he knows his brother needs, which is to because all throughout the episode Picard will not talk about it. Troy's trying to like get it out of him at the start, and he's like, oh no, everything's fine, I'm back to normal, I've healed. See, and she's like, well, yeah, the wounds in your skin have healed, but like
she's like, you're taking shore leave. What the hell's wrong with you? He's like, it's Earth. It always takes shore leave on Earth.
Yeah, totally out of character. Much better than the last time Picard took shore leave, I'll say that much. Just
night and day.
Yeah. So, they end up fighting in the mud, and they start laughing, and it's like they've got it out of their system, but then Picard starts crying, and he's covered in mud, and he's like saying, I failed, like I wasn't strong enough, and I lost. And it's kind of him admitting all this so he can go back out there and be the because I think it's this sort of thing where he almost was getting to the point where he felt invincible because he was such a good captain. He's so good at what he does, and the Enterprise has like solved so many like disputes, and they've been on so many missions, and there's been so much success. There's almost this almost ego sort of that starts to grow without like without any sort of malicious or like or even pretentious element to it, just something that's kind of festering because of your own success. And I feel like this puts so much fear into him. Maybe I feel that he's not felt in a long time because he's been so confident for so long.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that his brother kind of hit it a little bit before this scene, where he says, I always thought you needed some humility. He said, he talked about humiliation as well, but when he says, you need some humility, he says it in a really snarky way, like he's jabbing at him. But I think he's right, and he knows what he's saying there intentionally, and not in a malicious way. He's trying to goad his brother into seeing that maybe this is something that was inevitable.
Yeah, because his brother does come across a lot of the time as kind of a dick, and he is kind of a dick. He's kind of a dick throughout the whole episode, but he never crosses a line into be someone that you dislike, and I think it's because everything he's saying has enough of a truth to it that you can't discount what he's been a dick about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, Jean-Luc is our character, so we automatically side with him, because it's not like he is completely clean either here. He's putting in his own barbs and, being, intentionally prodding these arguments that he knows are going to wind his brother up, right?
Yeah.
Like he's kind of causing trouble a little bit, not always intentionally, but every so often, his brother and his wife talking about the argument about whether to get the synthesizer, and he just can't let it go. He could just move on. He's like, oh, I remember those arguments, and starts going on and goading his brother into having that argument there and then.
So let's just kind of look at this again. Picard breaks down and cries and says that he wasn't strong enough and that he failed. That entire concept, that moment of him saying that and breaking down like that, not only is it a tremendous character beat that gives Picard depth that, dare I say, that James Kirk never quite had, because they never gave Kirk a moment quite like that, but going back to the whole serialization element, like, you can't have a character in an episode later breaking down like this without fully committing to the idea that you're a serialized TV show. And don't get me wrong, I am sure this show is still going to have the majority of it will still be adventures that only last one episode, but
there's no going back from this point.
No, we're definitely into a new era. You can see an evolution here that probably ushered in kind of what I consider to be like the 90s form of the serialized TV show, where it's still a lot of adventures of the week, but there's ongoing plots, there's things that carry over, and it's something that develops continuously through the. I mean, I love bringing up Buffy a lot, but Buffy is more serialized than this. But again, like, at least for the first several seasons, there's a lot of standalone episodes with just the background ongoing thing bubbling away, and then it'll come to the fruition or the front.
I mean,
so on.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Early seasons of Buffy, you maybe have 4 to 6, big episodes a season in terms of the main plot.
Well, let's look at season 2 of Buffy. You have you have episode 1, which is mostly just dealing with stuff from season 1. Episode 3 is the one that really introduces the main stuff of the season. And then you've got a 2-parter in the middle, which kind of advances stuff, introduces Kendra, is kind of Spike and Drew's big attack, and then you've got essentially, it's not called a 2-parter, but it's essentially a 2-parter a few episodes later, which is Surprising Innocence, which is the big turning point of the season. So at that point you're say 5 episodes, and then of course you have the big 2-part finale, which is the real. Now, you can't just watch those episodes. There's actually little things that are in the background for a lot of the other episodes that are building to these next parts of these stories. But I mean, in fact, I would include Passion, so I would maybe bump up to 8 episodes from 7.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
About a third.
So about a third,
yeah.
Which, out of that many episodes isn't really that many. You're still vastly outnumbered by the quote unquote normal episodes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a gradual shift, and obviously you look at TV now, and it's all in for the most part on the serialization.
Yeah, it's just fascinating watching this and seeing it develop as it goes, and this moment with Picard breaking down is powerful on its own right from a performance and from a narrative point of view, but it's also powerful because it's the sort of thing that I've never seen in a Star Trek show before up until this point. An order, so it had kind of a meta power on top of it, which I think is not something to ignore. So
no, that's a fair point. And correct if I'm wrong, because I didn't watch Picard. I know a lot of the vague beats, but this episode kind of feels almost more important in hindsight, given the opening of what that show is. Some of the beats here kind of feel like, okay, they're kind of picking up threads. With the stuff with the vineyard.
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, but I don't know if this is the last time we see it in this show. I mean, I don't know if this is specifically the
maybe
episode.
Maybe not, but like the moment at the end of this where, he talks about how, if he's ever not sure of his future again, this is where he'll come.
Sure, yeah.
Things like that line feel like they have more weight now that Picard as a show kind of exists.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing though. I think the later episodes of this very show might give them more weight anyway.
They might well, yeah.
So that's an odd way of thinking about it. I never really thought about even bringing Picard into the conversation, because it's just Picard was something that was thought of much, much later.
It's true. This is from context of I don't really know, how much this appears in this show from here on.
Yeah, so I don't really want to bring Picard into the conversation, because I don't think it really matters, because this show, when it was aired, when it was written, had no plans for that. So
no, of course, I'm just talking about in the same meta capacity that you're talking about how you view it in, as this turning point for Trek, and being like the first time you see this. It's just something that I can't help but feel in the back of my head as I'm watching it, as it feels like, okay, it's the start of that plot. Maybe there's more in the journey in between, but this does feel like the start of that journey.
I guess, I don't know. This is a bit of a stretch for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's a bit of a stretch for me because I don't view Picard as a natural progression. I view Picard as what Halloween 2018 is to Halloween, where we want a new thing, so we're going to bank on nostalgia and pick up a lot of threads that we know will click some buttons for people who care about the thing.
Sure.
So I think it's disingenuous to kind of bring that into the conversation and kind of connect it to this in the same way that I'm saying that because this episode, when I'm talking about this episode accomplishing this moment, which works on its own terms but also on a meta level, it's not on a meta level just because we're watching it now. It's on it was a meta level when it originally aired. It was it was in the episode. Yeah. It was a big deal for what it was doing at the time. Anything that ties back into anything in the show, I mean, it's fun to point out connections and whatever, but it's more about the later stuff wanting to call back to moments that were already meaningful in their own right. Yeah, anyway, elsewhere in the episode, I mean, well, the vineyard stuff actually ends with the final scene of the episode is actually like the kid outside. The brothers like let him dream as he's looking up at the stars, and it's kind of this sort of little, idyllic. It's the little idyllic shot of the, it's almost like a painting as he's looking up at the stars. And
it's like a shooting star or something.
Yeah. So the Worf stuff though is kind of fun. Worf's parents are coming to visit, which he's not happy about because it's not proper for a Klingon to have the parents visit while they're on active duty. To which he's offered, hey, well, I could just take you off active duty and give you more shore leave time. He's like, no, don't want that. So
I can appreciate where it's coming from. The idea of parents visiting the workplace sounds horrific.
It does, but it seems to be a normal thing in the Enterprise though, because hell. O'Brien's got a story to share. When his parents were last here, his dad was chasing the nurse around the med bay. Maybe like the kayaking runs in the family. I mean, I don't know. Which, by the way, I can't believe we were cracking jokes about the kayaking when he brought it up. Apparently, this becomes a thing in Deep Space Nine. Apparently, kayaking is what he likes to talk about.
Oh, really?
Kayaking's a running thing. Apparently, it just so happens we were making fun of it so much.
We're ahead of the game on that one.
Yes. But yeah, so there's a lot of fun stuff. There's a nice scene I think with the parents and Guinan that I really liked, where Guinan's talking about everyone in this ship eventually comes to 10 forward and they look out that window and they're looking at the stars, they're looking for home, and kind of like sums up the whole thing with saying, when Worf looks out there, I don't think he's looking for the Klingon Empire. He's looking, for where you two are. He's looking for, that's what he considers home, despite the fact that he's obviously so proud of his, Klingon heritage, almost to a fault where he's always trying to prove how much of a Klingon he is. Probably because he's so separated from it.
Yeah, and they talk about growing up, he wouldn't touch human food. It was, no, you cook me Klingon shit.
Yeah, but now he's out of the prune juice, apparently. Again,
he's mellowed in his age.
Yes, apparently he can't get enough of it. He loves the prune juice.
I get it. This feels really, really relatable in a very human way, in the idea of, okay, when you're a teenager, you go through this phase of maybe things are too childish looking, right? And I'm not interested in that anymore, even though there's no, actual reason for it. And then as you get a bit older, you come back around, view it, a bit more in its own right, and go, okay, no, it had merit, and you kind of just despised it as a teenager because you liked it when you were younger, and you wanted to, prove you weren't that. And this is kind of like that with Worf here, where he's like, no, it's all Klingon all the way, and then as he's gotten older, it's like, the human stuff has some merit.
Yeah. No, it's kind of amusing. There's a lot of little moments with Worf where you kind of catch him smiling a little bit at his parents being his parents.
My favorite moment of all was when he's just by himself in his room and he's checking his hair in the mirror because I think his dad had made a comment that his hair was getting long.
Now, there's a lot of moments like that where he'll then sort of sharpen up when he's talking on his communicator. His voice will change. Go more Worf-like. But he kind of lowers his guard a little bit around his parents at times. The stuff was a running gag where his dad wants to see the ship. He's really into starships. He's got all the schematics at home. He's very excited.
He used to serve on one.
Yeah. So he runs out of Picard at the end, and Picard's back in the ship, and Picard says hello, and Worf has to kind of rush him out into the transporter room. Because he's about to ask, because Picard says, oh, you got a full tour of the ship, I expect. He's like, well, actually, there's a few areas that have been cut off because of the maintenance. So, I mean, and so
I wouldn't say no to staying a bit longer and see those. And they're like, nope, away we go.
So, no, all very likable, all very. It was a nice little human follow-up to Worf's story. As much as this is a companion, obviously, the last couple episodes for Picard, for Worf, it does tie back to his episode last season. And I feel like all this human stuff kind of gives a nice softer touch, like something that's like, okay, he had to take this dishonor of being essentially ostracized from the Klingon Empire, but this kind of human side gave you this sort of cushion, whereas oh wait, his life isn't completely screwed because of this. He does have things to be happy about. He does have a home and a family.
There's a great couple of moments in regards to this specifically, where early on he mentions how no human understands what it's like for him, and they can't fathom what he has to go through. But then you have that scene later with his parents where they actually sit down and be like, look, maybe we don't fully understand it, but that's okay. You're not going through it alone. And he actually responds with a bit of warmth.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, and again, another good little character beat. There's no data in this episode, and I think Riker's maybe the one who's talking to Worf at the start.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, that's the only time you see Riker in the episode, though. He's not there again after that. Geordi's only in the one scene when Worf's parents are getting. So yeah, there's a bunch of characters who just aren't in this episode, or if they are, they're there for one scene.
Yeah, Wesley has 2 or 3 scenes that are,
he's got the C plot. He's got
fine at best, I guess.
Beverly finds an old thing. She has like a case out of stories that was unearthed, and there's an old like hologram message for Wesley from his dad, and she's like debating whether to give it to him.
I guess in the future they still do that cheesy shit of recording a video message right after the baby's born.
I guess so. I did like the touch that it was the red and white uniforms from the movies.
I actually did like that. Yeah,
that was a nice touch. It's there's a message at the end. It's like, I love you, son. Maybe you'll be a Starfleet officer yourself someday. Nah, you'll probably be a doctor. How disappointed he would be that he didn't become a doctor, like he suspected. But I don't have a whole lot to say about the Wesley subplot, and not just because I don't like Wesley. I just don't think there's that much in it.
I think it's literally 2, 3 scenes. What you got? You got Beverly getting the thing, and I don't know if Wes should have it. He's finally come to terms with everything. Then
talking to Wesley and giving it to him, and then the scene of Wesley going and actually watching it.
Yeah,
it's basically those 2 scenes. Like
in a vacuum, let's say I lied to Wesley, right, and I wanted more of Wesley's stuff. Hypothetically, I think this would still be a bit of a disappointing plot in that context, because I would like, in that context, I would like to see more of Wesley actually having the decision of, does he want to watch this message? Does he want to just, leave it behind? Honestly, in an ideal world, he chooses not to watch this message right now, puts it away, and maybe watches it in the future after something, a dangerous mission or something or other. And he's like, okay, no, I actually want to watch this now.
I get what the thinking is putting it in this episode where you're doing this introspective stuff for both Worf and Picard, but both of those characters are going through something either from just before or just a little bit ago, and these subplots for them are giving them some sort of closure or some sort of advancement on those. It's much needed for the characters. Wesley,
I can't recall anything to do with his father really since like season 1.
Well, it's just always been there. I mean, it's just not something that's super relevant right now. And that would be okay if there was something that came out of it, like maybe there was something specific in the message that sort of inspired a choice that Wesley has to make or something, but it doesn't really feel like it actually did anything beyond just give him this sort of moment, and it kind of feels like it could have literally been any episode and would just be as equally inconsequential to any episode. I mean, maybe I'll eat my words. Maybe next episode he'll come out and say, you know what, I've made a choice. I'm inspired by my father, and I'm going to finally go off to Starfleet Academy and work towards my goals.
Yeah, I'm going to go be a doctor instead.
I'm giving up on all this nonsense and going away to be the wunderkind that the alien dude from season 1 said I could be. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
that. I remember these things occasionally.
No, it's not like it's out of my brain. As soon as you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I remember all of the important details. It's just I had forgotten it was an episode because it was so long ago that I watched it.
But yeah, there you go. That's the episode 2. So yeah, I think it's pretty solid. Obviously, it's a more low-key episode, but I think it's actually kind of refreshing to see Star Trek do an episode like this, where it's addressing the characters' drama that they've been building up, perhaps for a while, or something they've just went through in Picard's case. So, you can, of course, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments. I will tell you what's coming next time, though. Episode 3 is called Brothers, and this is the description. After an accident aboard the Enterprise leaves one of its children in grave danger, Data commandeers the Enterprise, driven to take the ship to an unknown origin, where an interesting figure awaits. Data commandeers the ship.
a
bit bold.
Data's past episode, perhaps?
Possibly. It's a bit bold, but we'll see. We'll see how this goes. Interesting there was no Data this episode, the next episode's all Data. I wonder if that was very intentional. Maybe there was a lot of extra shooting to do with Brent Spiner on the next episode.
Yeah, filming schedules meant, okay, no, you take an extra couple of days off now because you we're working you hard over the weekend.
Yeah. I don't know if that means that there's like dream sequences where there's like 3 Datas all talking to each other, so you have to shoot multiple scenes multiple times.
That wouldn't be out of the ordinary for a Data sequence.
No. Alright, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fudge for channel updates. If you want to support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/mailfudgetv, and you can do that for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. Otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. And remember, when it comes to the ladies, Wesley Crusher is in complete control.